Harper had been standing in my kitchen for 20 minutes trying to open a jar of pasta sauce, and at some point the situation had gone from mildly funny to a full personal crisis. "It's vacuum sealed," I said. "I know it's vacuum sealed." She turned it again. "Nothing. I'm aware of how jars work. You could just tap the lid." She looked at me the way you look at someone who has said something both obvious and deeply unhelpful. "I have been tapping the lid." "With what?" "My hand." "You need something harder. I need this jar to respect me." I handed her a wooden spoon. She looked at it, looked at the jar, then tapped the lid twice around the edge with the kind of focused resentment that suggested the jar had personally wronged her at some earlier point in her life. It opened on the second tap. She held it up like she had won something. "See," she said. "I had it. You absolutely did not have it. I loosened it. You witnessed the loosening." I turned back to the stove and tried not to laugh, because Harper was already putting the spoon down with the specific dignity of someone who planned to never acknowledge this conversation again. She had shown up an hour earlier, with a bag of groceries, and a very detailed complaint about her afternoon. Something had gone wrong at work. A miscommunication between two teams that had somehow turned into her problem to fix. And by the time she got to my apartment, she had the look she gets when she has been calm and professional all day and has used up everything she had. "I just need to cook something," she said. "Don't talk to me about it yet. Let me cook first." So I had stayed out of the way while she found a pot and filled it with water and rooted around in my pantry for pasta, like she had done this before. Which she had. My kitchen was not unfamiliar to Harper. Over the 4 years we had been friends, she had learned where I kept the colander, which burner ran hot, and that the drawer beside the fridge stuck if you didn't pull it at a slight angle. She knew these things the way you know the layout of a place you have been to, often enough that your hands remember it without asking your brain. That happened with Harper. She learned the small geography of your life, and then became part of it so quietly that you stopped noticing she was there until she wasn't. We had met at a friend's housewarming party in Liberty Village. My friend Marcus, her friend Celia, and whoever was now technically our mutual friend, was a question nobody had ever bothered to settle. I had been standing near the kitchen island eating bruschetta, and wishing the music was slightly quieter when Harper appeared beside me and said, without introduction, "These are going to be soggy in about 10 minutes. "The bruschetta?" "The tomatoes are too wet. You can already see it starting on the corners." I looked at the bruschetta. She was right. "We have maybe 8 good minutes left," she said. "Eat accordingly." Her name was Harper. She lived in Leslieville, worked in UX design, had opinions about transit, infrastructure that she delivered with the energy of someone who had once thought about running for city council, and then thought better of it. We talked through the rest of the party and split a cab heading east, because our neighborhoods were close enough that it made sense. She made me laughed twice in the first hour, which was faster than most people managed. That was 4 years ago. Since then, coffee runs before work when neither of us felt like making it ourselves. Texts at weird hours about things that were not quite emergencies but needed to be said to someone. Arguments about what counted as a good film that lasted longer than the films themselves. She showed up when I had to wait for a technician all day and couldn't leave. I drove her to the airport at 5 a.m. when she had an early flight and wouldn't let herself spend money on a cab. We walked around the waterfront on evenings, where one of us had a bad day, and the other one just showed up without being asked. People assumed things. Her coworkers, my friends, the woman at the farmer's market on Queen, who saw us every Saturday for about a year, and once asked if we wanted 1 bag or 2, as if it was already settled. We never corrected anyone with much urgency. That was probably its own answer, but neither of us looked at it directly. In the kitchen, Harper had the sauce going, and was waiting for the water to boil, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed and looking at the ceiling like it owed her something. "Do you want to talk about it now?" I asked. "Yeah, okay." She exhaled. "So Ryan sends the deck to the client before I've had a chance to review the final version, which I told him I needed to do, which was on the shared calendar. And then the client has questions about 3 slides that I specifically flagged as needing more work. So now I'm the one who has to get on a call tomorrow to explain revisions that shouldn't have been shown yet." She stopped. "I'm not even angry at Ryan. That's the thing. I'm just tired of being the person who cleans things up quietly and nobody notices." "That sounds exhausting." It is exhausting." She looked at the pot. "I'm going to ask for a raise." "You should. I've been thinking about it for 4 months." "I know." She looked at me. "How do you know?" "You mentioned it. In September when we were at that pasta place on Dundas. You said you were going to wait until the new year and see." She blinked. "I forgot I said that." "You said it the same night. You ordered the gnocchi and then immediately regretted it and ate half my cacio e pepe. The gnocchi was disappointing. You warned yourself it would be and ordered it anyway." I had optimism. She pushed off the counter and stirred the sauce. "I do that sometimes. It doesn't always work out." The water started moving. She added salt, which she did with the same casual confidence a line cook would, because Harper had taken a 6-week Italian cooking class 2 winters ago and had been quietly correcting people's pasta water salt levels ever since. We ate at the small table by the window the way we usually did. Plates too close together, because the table was never quite the right size. The overhead light a little too warm, the city doing its usual evening thing outside. She told me more about the work situation. I told her about a thing that had happened with my downstairs neighbor and the parking spot that technically didn't belong to either of us, but that we were both now deeply invested in. She laughed. I refilled her water without asking. After dinner, she stayed on the couch while I washed the dishes. That was how it usually went. She would sit with her legs tucked under her and scroll through her phone or half watch whatever was on. And I would do the dishes, and the conversation would go in and out of itself, in the easy way that conversations do when you have been talking to the same person long enough that silences don't mean anything. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yeah. Why are you still not seeing anyone?" I kept washing the pot. "Where did that come from?" "I don't know. I was just thinking. You haven't mentioned anyone in a while." She paused. "A long while. I've been busy." "You're always busy." That's not an answer. I set the pot in the drying rack. Dating apps got old. I did a few things last spring that went nowhere. It just stopped feeling worth the effort. Harper was quiet for a moment. "Is that actually why?" Something in the way she said it made me turn around. She was looking at me from the couch with the kind of expression that meant she was asking something specific and already suspected she knew the answer. I turned back to the sink. "Write in the comments. Should I have just answered honestly right then, or did I do the right thing by hesitating?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe not." "What does that mean?" I dried my hands on the dish towel and tried to figure out what version of the truth I was willing to give her. There were several. Most of them I had been keeping filed away under the heading of things I would deal with later, which had been working fine as a system for approximately 3 years. It means I start things, and they don't go anywhere, and after a while I figured out. Why? Why? I didn't answer right away. The dish towel was in my hands and I was folding it into a rectangle for no reason. "Because I keep comparing everyone to you," I said. "And it's not fair to them, and it hasn't been fair to either of us." Harper did not move. I put the dish towel down on the counter. "I know that's a lot to say on a Tuesday after pasta. I'm sorry if the timing is terrible." She still wasn't saying anything, which was unusual enough that I had to look at her. Harper always had something ready. She was the person who could finish a thought in the middle of someone else's sentence and make it better than where it was going. She did not go quiet. But that was not her thing. But she was quiet now. How long? She asked finally. Honestly, I don't know exactly. It crept up. There wasn't a moment where I realized it. It was more like, I thought about it. You know how sometimes you notice the sun has set, and you can't remember when it got dark? Like that. She looked at the window. Outside, the lights on the street had come on and someone was walking a dog past the front of the building. And the city was doing what cities do at 9 on a weeknight, which is continue without asking anyone's permission. I think I know the moment for me, she said. Yeah? She pulled her sleeve over her hand. She did that when she was working something out. I had noticed that about her years ago and never said so. Last February, when my dad was in the hospital for the thing with his shoulder, the surgery. I was at St. Michael's for 6 hours waiting, and I didn't tell most people, because I didn't want anyone to make a big thing of it. But I told you. She looked at me, and you came. You just came and sat in those chairs with me for 3 hours, and we split a terrible sandwich from the vending machine. And you didn't ask me how I was feeling. Every 10 minutes, you just sat there. I remembered. The chairs were uncomfortable. The sandwich was not good. Harper had been pretending she was fine. And not pretending it very well. And I had not said anything about that, because saying something would have made it worse. That was when I thought, okay, this is a problem. That you have a friend who will sit in a hospital with you? That I was sitting in an emergency waiting room at 9 o'clock. And the only person I wanted there was already there. She looked at the carpet. I had been seeing someone at the time. He texted to ask if I needed anything. I said I was fine. I meant it. She paused. That was probably information. We sat with that for a second. The dog outside had gone. A streetcar went by. The heater clicked on. I didn't say anything because I thought I'd ruin everything, I said. I didn't say anything for the same reason. We're the same amount of stupid. We are exactly the same amount of stupid, she exhaled. 4 years. 4 years. We've had so many chances. I nodded. I know. Like a genuinely embarrassing number of chances. I know. There was the night of your birthday thing at that bar on King, where the two of us ended up walking home along the lake, because the Uber surge was insane. And you said the lake looked like a movie set and I almost said something. I wouldn't have stopped you. I didn't know that. She shook her head. I also wouldn't have stopped you at Banff last March when we were on that trail, and it started snow out of nowhere, and we were both slightly underdressed and stood there for like 5 minutes watching it come down. We were not prepared for the snow. We were not prepared for the snow. We were deeply underprepared. She looked at me. I thought about it then too. I thought about it a lot of times, and I didn't say anything because... She stopped. Because you're the person I call first. When something good happens, when something goes wrong, when I'm just bored and I want to tell someone about a podcast I heard on the way to work. If I said something and it didn't work, I didn't know who I would call. That's what scared me. I moved from the kitchen and sat down on the other end of the couch. Not close enough to make the moment heavier than it needed to be, just close enough to stop having this conversation across the room, like a pair of people who hadn't known each other for 4 years. You'd still call me, I said. You don't know that, I do. We're too far in to go anywhere. We know too many terrible things about each other. That's not how it works. Harper, you know I cried at that dog movie in 2022. That's not information a person walks away from. I cried at that movie too. The scene at the park? Yeah, everyone did. My point is, we're past the point of no return on actually knowing each other. Whatever happens, you're still calling me. She looked at me for a long moment, long enough that I started to wonder if I had gotten this wrong, if I had misjudged the whole thing and was about to need a very different conversation. Then she said, You cried pretty hard at that dog movie. I said what I said, like, several times. The ending was cumulative. She smiled. And it was the real one, the one that got into her eyes before her mouth caught up. Not the polite one she used at work functions. Not the one for strangers. The one that meant something had landed right. Okay, she said. Quiet, like she was confirming something to herself. Okay? She picked at the edge of the couch cushion. I've been pretending for a long time. It's getting old. Me too. I want to stop. Yeah, I said. Same, she looked at the ceiling. This is very strange. A little, I came over here to complain about Ryan and now. She gestured loosely at the situation. Pasta and a confession. That's a very efficient Tuesday. I thought so. She looked at me then and something shifted. I don't know how to describe it better than that. The conversation had been moving towards something for a few minutes, and suddenly we were there, and neither of us was pretending we weren't. Come here, she said. I moved closer. She turned to face me and I reached over and tucked a piece of her hair back behind her ear because she had been doing it herself for the past 10 minutes, and missing. And she went still under my hand in a way that made everything in my chest go quiet. Hi, she said. Hi. This is, yeah. I kissed her, carefully, at first. The way you do when you are aware that you are crossing a line that has existed for a long time, and you want to do it right. She made a sound that I had never heard from her before, and that I wanted to hear again. And her hand came up to the front of my shirt and held on. When we pulled back, she kept her hand on my shirt. Okay, she said again. Still okay? Very okay, she exhaled. We wasted a lot of time. We were being careful. We were being ridiculous. We were being carefully ridiculous. She laughed, and it was the full one, the kind she couldn't stop once it started, and I felt it in my own chest before I knew I was going to laugh too. And just like that the tension broke open, and it was still us. Still the same couch. Same lamp. Same kitchen where she had conquered the jar. Same city going past the window without asking anyone. Only now she had her shoulder against mine and wasn't moving away from it. We put something on TV that neither of us were actually watching. She fell asleep with her head hot on my shoulder around 11, which had happened before, on late nights. Except this time when it happened, I didn't move away, and I didn't make a quiet joke about it when she woke up. I just stayed there. She did wake up around midnight and looked around for a second the way people do when they have fallen asleep somewhere that wasn't their bed. I should go home, she said. You don't have to. She looked at me. I looked at her. I have the Ryan call in the morning, she said. I need real sleep. That's fair. She got up and found her jacket and her bag. I walked her to the door. She stood in the doorway for a second the way she did sometimes, when she was deciding whether to say one more thing. Hey, she said. Yeah, I'm glad I ran out of pasta sauce. That was why she had come over with groceries. Her own pasta sauce had been empty. She had texted to ask if she could grab some from me and then ended up just bringing everything and cooking here instead. Me too, I said. Let me know how the call goes. I'll text you after. I know you will. She left. About 3 weeks later, almost nothing had changed. She still texted me about the podcast episodes I absolutely had to hear. I still saved her the better parking spot when I saw it first. We still walked to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. Same vendor, same routine, same woman, who now said our names when she saw us coming. The difference was small, but it was real. When we sat at the counter at our usual coffee place on Queen. And she laughed at something I said. And her hand landed on my arm. She didn't move it. When we walked back to the car, and the wind came off the lake, the way it does in March, cold and salt-edged and very Canadian, she leaned into my side, and I put my arm around her shoulders, and neither of us pointed it out. One afternoon she called me from work because the Ryan situation had finally been acknowledged in a meeting, and she was walking to the elevator and needed to tell someone immediately. She talked for 6 minutes whilst I sat in a meeting room eating my lunch. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. Okay, she said finally. I'll tell you the rest tonight. I'll be home by 6. I'll bring wine. You're going to make me cook, aren't you? I'm going to make you cook. I knew she would. I had known her long enough to know she would show up with a bottle of something good and a general sense of direction about dinner, and then find a way to end up at the kitchen table telling me about her day while I did most of the actual cooking, and that I would not mind a single part of it. I had known that for years, actually. I had just been pretending I didn't.